before we start with this video, if you like videos about online entrepreneurship, about online business, then make sure you hit the subscribe button, get notified every time I drop a new video. There's a new one goes out every week where I'm giving out information about online businesses, giving you updates about my own online business and affiliate marketing that I'm building at the moment. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and get notified. There's also links in the description to my Facebook group and also to my website. So make sure you jump onto those if you want more content like this. Now, let's get on with the video. Okay, so let's talk about your why. In an earlier video, I talked about the 4 things that you need to be a successful entrepreneur, and one of those was to have a really strong why. But I believe that's so important that I want to spend some time on exploring a little bit more about what is a why it's important, and how you might find it. So I think the starting point is understanding that we humans, we do things for 2 main reasons: to gain pleasure and to avoid pain. And at the end of the day, whether we do something or not depends on whether the pleasure we get from what we're doing or the pain that we avoid by doing it outweighs the pain of actually doing it. So let's try an example. So let's say that you are offered $100 to do a 3-minute comedy set on national television. Now, for a lot of people, the pain of having to do 3 minutes on national television and be funny, the pressure, the fact that you might not see yourself as a comedian, you might not think that you're very funny. People are super scared of public speaking generally. I think there's been some research to suggest that public speaking is even scarier to some people than death. And to add on top of that, the need to be funny, the pain of embarrassing themselves on national television to do a 3-minute comedy set would be huge. And for a lot of those people, the benefit of receiving $100, the pleasure that you would gain from that would simply not outweigh the pain of having to do it. Now, for other people, it might be a completely different scenario. Other people would do it. Maybe some people would even do it for free. If you saw yourself as a budding comedian and you saw that as an opportunity to get some national recognition or some exposure for your comedy, then you probably wouldn't even take the $100. The benefit of getting that exposure and getting that recognition would clearly outweigh the pain of having to do it, which may not be pain at all for someone who is comfortable in that situation. So you can see there that the equation is different for different people, but in each case it is a matter of weighing up the pleasure or avoidance of pain that you get from doing it, as opposed to the pain of doing it. Now let's change the scenario a little bit, just to illustrate that a little bit further. Let's say that instead of being offered $100, you're offered $1,000, or maybe $100,000, or maybe $1 million. Now at $1 million, I'd bet that a lot more people would do that because the level of pleasure has been ratcheted up by 10,000 times from the original 100. So the pleasure is much higher. So for many people, that now might outweigh the pain of actually doing it. Although I think for some people, the pain would still be too big even for $1 million. So let's take it to another level and change the scenario slightly. Let's say that instead of being offered $1 million, that someone had kidnapped one of your loved ones, someone who you are very close to and who you love very much, and said that unless you do a 3-minute comedy set on national television, that that person would be killed. Now, setting aside the ridiculousness of that actually happening and why a kidnapper would want you to do a comedy set in order to release the hostage, leaving that aside for a second, the point is that now you've got a massive amount of pain that you would be avoiding by doing this. So you're comparing the avoidance of that pain of a loved one being killed with the pain of actually doing it on national TV. Now, in that scenario, I would bet that the vast majority of people wouldn't even think twice. They'd do it because the level of pain is so much higher. Now, that illustrates, those three examples hopefully illustrate how the gaining of pleasure and the avoidance of pain and do drive what we do, and how there is always an equation there. The other point that it may illustrate is that generally the avoidance of pain is more of a driver or more of a motivation for many of us than the gaining of pleasure. So for a lot of people, the death of a loved one would far outweigh any amount of money. So, 10 million, $1 billion, whatever. Some people still wouldn't do it for that, but they would do it to avoid a loved one being harmed. So, really important to bear in mind is that not only the equation, but also the fact that in many cases the avoidance of pain is a more important driver or a stronger driver than the gaining of pleasure. So what does all this have to do with online business? Well, presumably, if you're thinking about starting an online business or you have started an online business, you have a reason for starting. And that reason is related to the gaining of pleasure or the avoidance of pain. So maybe you hate your job and you want to avoid the pain of having to keep going to your job day after day. Maybe you want more flexibility in your life. That's a pleasure side where you may want to, the pleasure of being able to spend more time with your family, the pleasure of being able to do more of what you want to do with your time. Or maybe like me, you want to achieve financial freedom and live your life on your terms. Now that's what I'm aiming for, and that is driven by pleasure as well. It's also driven by pain. Often there's two sides to the same coin. So when I was employed and I had a job, there was a certain level of pain involved, and so the pleasure of moving away from that was also the avoidance of the pain of continuing with that. So there is often both. So when you start an online business, it's important to recognize the avoidance of pain or the gaining of pleasure and how that is driving your desire to do that. Now, why is this important? It's important because things are going to get hard. When you start an online business, when you're an online entrepreneur, it's not all plain sailing. It doesn't matter what type of business you have. There will be times when things won't go your way. You'll launch a new funnel and it won't work. You'll have clients that'll drop out. You'll have suppliers that won't deliver. You could have defective products. You could have an ad account being shut down. It happens all the time. There's going to be a whole lot of challenges and roadblocks and issues that happen on the way. Things are going to get hard. And having clarity on your why is going to be critically important when that happens. So understanding what is the pain that you're trying to avoid by building an online business? What is the pleasure that you're trying to gain or the benefit that you're trying to gain by building an online business? That will provide the motivation for you when things get hard to overcome that roadblock, to get out of bed in the morning when you really don't feel like it, when you've had a bad day the day before, or even when you're halfway through a bad day and you're going, things aren't going my way today, I should just give up. Your why and having a really strong why is going to be really, really important in those times. Because at the end of the day, if you are going to hit those challenges, if when you do that you're just going to give up and go back to working your 9 to 5 or go back to what you were doing before, there's no point starting. There's no point spending the time, spending the money, putting in the effort to get started if you're just going to give it up when you hit a few challenges. So that is why having that why and having that really strong why and reminding yourself in those times why it is that you're doing what you're doing, that's why that's so important. So hopefully that provides some clarity around why it is so important to do that and why you really must have some clarity on that to start with. You can't remind yourself of it if you don't know what it is. You really need to have that clarity. So, how do you find it? How do you know what your why is? There may be some of you watching this who already know. You may have listened to what I've just said and gone, okay, I know exactly what it is. And for those people, congratulations, you have your why already clear, and the very fact that you already know it means that it's probably pretty strong. If it's that obvious to you, then it's probably quite a strong why, and it's something that is going to be able to drive you through those challenges and those difficult times. So you're in a great spot. If it's not that clear to you at the moment, though, that's okay. You just need to put in a bit of time and a bit of thought into understanding it. And I've got some questions that you could ask yourself to really help you understand what that is. So the types of questions you might want to ask are, firstly, what are the biggest pain points in your career right now? What are the biggest pain points in your life right now? How could an online business change any of those things for you? So if you were going to start an online business, think about what the benefits you are looking for that to bring you, and think about how that might change some of the pain points in your life or in your career. And that will start to direct you towards your why. What makes you happy? How can an online business increase that for you? Maybe it's the outcomes of spending more time with your family, spending more time with your friends, having more flexibility in your life. Maybe it's actually how you spend your time in your business. So maybe in your job, you're doing things day in, day out that you don't really enjoy, but you recognize that in building an online business, the things that you're doing in that business day in, day out make you happier. And that could be part of your why. Ask yourself, where could you be in 5 years' time if your business is successful? What if you had a 6 or even a 7-figure business? What would that change for you? What would it change for your family? How would you spend your time? All these questions are really good questions to ask yourself. And if you go through and think about the answers to those questions, write down what comes to mind and work through that, then I would bet that your why would start to emerge from that picture. You'd start to get a really clear view of what it is that is fundamentally driving you into this space, and what are the benefits, what's the pain you're avoiding, or the pleasure that you're gaining if you were successful. So I would highly recommend you go through that process. A couple of tips too in terms of your why. The first one, and this may sound a little bit weird at first, but the first one is make it selfish. I know that there's people who, when they're asked why are they doing what they do, or why do they, what actually drives them, and often it's altruistic. I want to help people. I want to alleviate this issue in the world, or in my community, or in my country. And that is fantastic. It's fantastic if you are driven by that. For many people, though, I think that we are relatively self-centered. Humans by nature are relatively self-centered. And so when times get tough, when it gets to the point where you do have the challenges and you have to really dig deep to overcome them, having a selfish why will tend to be stronger for many people. So think about your family, think about yourself, think about what you want to do. And even if you believe that your why is quite altruistic, you can also add a more selfish element onto that. So, if it is about helping your community, for example, or helping a community, then think about how that makes you feel. Do you feel more satisfied? Do you feel happier? Do you feel like you've accomplished something if you are able to help them? And build that in so that then you can draw on that feeling when the challenges are there to help drive you forward. So that's tip number one. Make it selfish. Don't be embarrassed about that. It's okay if it's selfish. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. You don't have to be altruistic all the time. Tip number two is that, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, pain is often stronger than pleasure. Without going into all the underlying psychology, the fact is that pain is stronger is a stronger motivator. So when you think about your why, think about the pleasure that you will gain, but also couch that in terms of the pain that you're avoiding. Or if there is a lot of pain avoidance involved in that, bring that out. Because that is really strong. When things get tough, you remind yourself that you really don't want to go back to where you were before. That can be a really strong driver. And the third tip is that making money or getting rich is not your why. Now, you might start off by saying, my why is that I want to make $10,000 a month or $20,000 a month or whatever, and think that's it. That's not a why. What you can do with that money, that may be your why. And if you're starting at that point of X amount of dollars, I would strongly encourage you to take it further than that. So what impact will that money have on your family? What can you do with it that would give you more fulfillment or make you happier or help your loved ones or whatever that might be? Just stopping at that monetary amount is, for most people, is not likely to be enough to really drive them. It's more about what they can do with that money, how it makes them feel. Those really more emotional and feeling elements are really, really critical to the why. So that's it. Go through the questions, remember the tips, and make sure that you do this before you go any further. I fundamentally believe that this is a really, really important element, and I think before you get too deep into it, you please make sure that you go through this process. Won't take long. Just think about it and make sure that you have some clarity on exactly what your why is, and write it down somewhere, on a piece of paper, have it on a screensaver, or post it up on the wall next to your desk or whatever, somewhere where you can see it regularly. And when you need to remind yourself, you can quite easily and quickly pick that up and remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. And finally, I'd also recommend that you redo it from time to time or revisit it from time to time. So, it doesn't need to be every week or every month or whatever, but every now and then just go back to that and say, is that still relevant? Is it still correct? Is it the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing? Just to make sure that that you're focusing on the right things and you're getting the motivation, the drive from that. And it could change over time. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Everyone's different from that perspective. So that's it. If you like that video, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and make sure you get notified for new videos, which I drop every week. Give us a comment in the comment section. I do read all the comments. I'll reply to any comments that come in, and I would love to see some comments there. And if you want more content like this, then my Facebook group goes into more depth, particularly about the business that I'm building in affiliate marketing. And there's also my website, both of which are linked in the show notes or in the description below. So take a look at those, and I'll see you next time.